So here we go. We're 3 after. Why don't we go ahead and get started? As people join, that's fine. Thank everyone for coming today. My name is Eric Hardy. I am the Vice President of SLED Sales at New Tech Solutions. We're going to kick off with just a quick high-level overview of who New Tech Solutions is and talk a little bit about how we like to bring innovation to the market, and then introduce you to someone we're very excited about, which is Noodle Factory and the solution with their AI-powered innovation to bring AI tutoring assessments to the education market. I think will be a lot of great content. And then following the meeting, we'll definitely get the content out to you as well as the recording of the session. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Just talk about New Tech Solutions at a high level. We are an innovation partner, and what does that mean to you? Our goal is to bring the latest innovation to your organization. A lot of technology out there today. It's a very transformational time in technology, and it's a complex endeavor for you to embark on by yourself. So what we look to do is understand some of your needs, and we look at the latest technology, the latest innovation, the latest solutions that would be most impactful to achieve your results. That's why we are called an innovation partner. So today we are hosting in this session one of those partners of ours that we have been working with, Noodle Factory, and we think that they can really provide some ideal business outcomes for your education institution. So what is it we do as a whole at New Tech Solutions? There's 5 areas and there's 5 pillars of expertise that we focus on. We focus on data and AI, cybersecurity, modern infrastructure, modern workspace, and cloud. Today with Noodle Factory, that falls into the data and AI category. And our approach to the market, we call it smart disruption. We're not looking to do the same old technology solutions that you've been doing for 20 years. We're changing it up because the market's demanding that. So we're looking to change the business model from CapEx to OpEx to provide you a more dynamic way to experience technology. We are also looking to provide innovation to our customers. Some of these innovations are what you may not have heard about. Some of these are traditional solutions. It's just an alternative way to approach it. And also looking at strategic alternatives that'll provide a differentiated value. That includes the way you're doing your network or your cybersecurity today. Maybe you've been doing it the same way for 20 years. Let's look at alternative ways to provide differentiated value. So that's what we do, and that's our goal to the market at New Tech Solutions. Thank you. All right. At this point, I am going to hand it over to Jim Wagstaff from Noodle Factory. Jim, take it away.
All right, Eric, thank you so much. Thank you for having us, and it's really an honor to be partnering with New Tech. Great to be here with you. I wanted to kick off by kind of introducing our topic today. The reason you're here is you're probably interested in one of the hottest topics, which is how AI is affecting not only education very broadly, but specifically assessment, and that's where we're going to be really centering our conversation today. The Q&A panel is active too, so if you have questions as we go along, please do go ahead and pop those questions in the Q&A panel. I'll occasionally stop and check to see what questions we have. We don't have to save all of those up until the end. I'll just very quickly introduce myself and how I'm coming to this topic. By the way, there's my contact information, and I'll flash that up at the end of today's session. But my recent background is really centered on the application of AI in teaching and learning, and I'm doing that in different ways. I work with a couple of different organizations, one of which is the Principals Academy, and another is Singapore Management University, in both researching and then also developing faculty in this area. Most recently, I was a faculty member at the American Association of Colleges and Universities AI Institute and got a chance to work with quite a number of universities from around the world. Despite the name, there's a global cohort that is a part of AAC&U. And so, I really spend a lot of time both practically with Noodle Factory and what we do with faculty, but also working alongside faculty in professional development and helping to understand where they are and where they're going. Now, at the end of today, I'll flash up this QR code again, but I wanted to share this first. If you wanted to go ahead and attach to that and really make sure that you get all of the resources that we talk about today, both the recording, but also a couple of action research papers that I'll refer to throughout the session. You might want to just grab that now. You can also get a free subscription to Noodle Factory and try out what we're going to show. Although the topic today is really around assessment, and we're going to use Noodle Factory to demonstrate some of the things that we're talking about related to integrative assessment, as we'll call it today, and how we get really closer to authentic assessment with our students. So very quickly, let me just give you a brief background on Noodle Factory and who we are and what we do and how we partner with New Tech Solutions. So we've been at this for almost 8 years, meaning AI in education. There's a big anniversary coming up in about 17 days. That was the launch of ChatGPT back in 2022, November 30th, 2022, a day that you either really cherish or maybe it changed the world for you in not so good ways. But it was a day that was interesting for us because we've been at this so long talking about the application of AI in teaching and learning. And before that date, we really had to do a lot of education and explaining, what are you talking about here? This conversational AI approach, getting students to engage with AI in these novel ways. And after ChatGPT hit the market, we didn't have to do that anymore. So you are all familiar with how ChatGPT works and how it can work in education. And when we think about what we're trying to do, it's about scaling learner engagement. It's about making sure that from a use case perspective, students in a controlled environment, in a walled garden, if you will, have access to 24/7 answers, support, getting very specific AI tutoring and coaching, doing exam and test prep, role plays, a couple of things that we'll look at, but all in this controlled environment where there's a high level of visibility and control inside of the learning management system. Uh, you might be thinking too, why noodles? Why are we called Noodle Factory? We love noodles, but we don't make noodles. No, we're talking about noodle as in brain. So just using that as a play on words. It's also a design principle that we have. If you eat instant noodles, probably when you're a student, how long do those take to get ready and eat, even if you spice them up a little bit? About 2 or 3 minutes. And that's the design principle we have. We want to be up and running and ready to go for a teacher, for a learning designer in just a few minutes. So we don't want to be complicated. We want to be simple and get our solution ready to go and out in front of students very quickly. Okay, so let's talk about assessment. So a few things that I want to touch on very briefly are some of the challenges related to AI in assessment and really the notion of AI affecting assessment. This really speaks to the need to rethink traditional assessments. By the way, this is not a new challenge. This is probably a 30-year-old challenge, but AI is really bringing this conversation to a head. And we'll talk about some of the human advantage skills that AI can't replace, but we probably still need to authentically assess and the ways that AI can potentially help us to do that in a more scalable fashion with students. We'll look at some redesign of assessment, and I'll show you a couple of examples, give you some thought, some food for thought around that, more human-centered, more authentic approaches. And then lastly, I've got some potential actions that you might want to take, some investigation that you might want to undertake, where you'll want to think of AI as an ally or a teaching assistant, where you can support more formative feedback and personalization without consuming more time. So sort of breaking the paradox of formative assessment. So a statistic you've probably seen that gets revised very often these days is that there are a lot of students who are using AI tools. So here we're talking about general purpose tools. So think Gemini, Claude, Perplexity, ChatGPT, and others. The most current number that I've seen is this one. 92% of students are now using AI tools. And that can either be a really scary number, it can be an inspiring number, depending on how you're coming to this topic. But the point is that it's this is growing and it's continuing to grow. We expect it to grow and we expect it to continue. So this is not something that's going away anytime soon. The challenge with this is, as we'll see, the threat to academic integrity, and the threat to learning is real. So cognitive offload is a real problem if we don't approach learning and then very specifically assessment in a way that understands and adapts to AI being a part of student life. So I want you to think about this, and hopefully you've tried this. I'm going to give you a decision tree in a moment that will help you to think this through if you haven't thought about this. But if you had a student who was in your class that was an AI, so think of AI in your class as a student, what sort of grade do you think that that student would achieve if you were to give it last semester's final exam? Would they be a top student, maybe a strong student, but not top? Would they be barely passing, or would they be failing? And I'm sort of leading the witness here, I guess, but most teachers tell me, and in fact, I did a workshop yesterday where we had some teachers actually do this exercise. They were scoring some of them A's, almost all B's, though, depending on the tool that was being used. So either a top student or a strong but not top. Point here is that AI can easily pass even our most rigorous exams. And so it really is requiring that rethink of what we mean by assessment and trying to get it closer to reality in the world of AI today. The flip side of this is if we think about standard assignments, projects, things that we would expect students to be able to do and then ultimately be assessed on, you might think that we're able to detect when students are using AI and that this is an arms race, but these days it's really not the case. Tools like Turnitin miss about 15% of AI generated text. Excuse me one second. Different independent studies from schools like San Diego State and others have seen that there's about 50% false positive rates on AI detectors. Stanford has identified that particularly students who use English as a second language are often incorrectly flagged as using AI over 50% of the time. So there's a high degree of inequity there. And the University of Maryland recently did a study that showed that simple paraphrasing defeats detection entirely. So AI detectors, at least right now, are not a good answer, not a consistently good answer. So we've got to do something else about this. Now, with that in mind, knowing that AI is a good student, can pass the exam, and if we have our students using AI, that's a challenge. We can't really detect that that's going on. Think about this as well. Which aspect of assessment worries you the most? Is it students submitting AI written work as their own? So there's an authorship challenge there. Is it that assessments really lose their meaning? Is it that there's an erosion of critical thinking, which is a real thing that's going on? And are there new inequalities or inequities that are creeping in? So the digital divide getting wider. Well, if you answered all of these, you're not alone. So typically, when I run my professional development workshops with teachers, all of these are a big concern, some more than others. But what we're seeing is that this notion of AI is requiring that rethink. So I want to show you some ways that we can do that and show you some examples of the type of rethink that using a tool that is well thought out, that is aligned with the way that you teach, the way that students learn, and the new way that students are engaging with AI can really help to solve some of these problems. Part of the challenge is getting towards what is called authentic assessment. You probably have heard that term before, depending on the last professional development course that you had related to assessment. It could have been a while since you really thought about what authentic assessment means. But the bottom line here with authentic assessment is that it emphasizes the process of learning and the process of assessment over the product or the outcome. And so that's something that's become a watch phrase for me when we talk about the application of AI in teaching and learning. How do we get students to demonstrate more authentically the process that they're using and the process they're going through, even if we're encouraging them to use AI as an assistant or as a brainstorming tool or even as a research assistant, depending on the age and the complexity, age of the student and the complexity of the subject that we're talking about. The thing that authentic assessment is not is it doesn't require us to send students out into the real world. I was just having this conversation with an administrator yesterday that there's this misconception around authentic assessment that it requires us to get students to go out and do a project out in the real world or really break out of the classroom. That's certainly valuable and that can be useful, but what authentic assessment means is it's about mirroring tasks or problem solving that are close to the real world. So it isn't in the real world, but it's as close as we can possibly get. And I've got a couple of examples that I'll show you of that that are AI assisted. Another key thing that it requires is judgment, often generalization of the learning. So think cross-curricular generalization, uh, novel application of the skills, and really, you're asking students to do the subject rather than explain the subject. I think more than anything, for me, that's a good way to think of authentic assessment. And this is where AI has a lot of promise. Think about areas where it's too expensive or maybe too dangerous for students to go out and do something or do the subject. This is potentially where AI shows a lot of promise. What AI also allows us to consider is breaking the paradox of what we want, which is more authentic assessment, and what we can actually afford in terms of time. We don't have the time. So this paradox of I want more authentic assessment, but I don't have the time to devote to that if I use traditional methods. So tools that are AI powered in teaching and learning potentially can get us there. Now, just one last thing to think about is that there are certain ongoing challenges related to traditional assessments. Obviously, they're time consuming, as we just talked about. They can easily be created or written by AI. As we've already talked about too, they overemphasize output. There are issues of inclusivity. They may not be authentic, meaning we're more focused on knowledge retention rather than doing or applying the knowledge. Uh, there's a limited depth of feedback, largely because of the lack of time. And now, if you're an English teacher or if you use writing in assessments today, please don't hate me, but traditional assessments overvalue writing skills. What I'm not saying is that writing is not valuable. Writing is incredibly valuable. We need students to write well. They need to communicate in that way. But traditional assessments, think essays, tend to overvalue writing skills. So this is an opportunity to just rethink and reformat and redesign assessment in novel ways that incorporate AI that benefit not only the student because they're more authentic, but they benefit the teacher because they're more scalable. Now, let me show you a couple of examples of this. Now, what I'm not focusing on here is summative assessment. So let me just kind of clear that out of the way. Summative assessment or high stakes assessment, this is a kind of a politically charged conversation right now. The reason that I personally don't emphasize summative assessment is this is something that probably does need to be administered in a way that is more traditional, even if it's authentic. And that's more of a statement around the sensitivity related to the politics of this. Parents also have some sensitivity around the use of AI in summative assessment. So my advice is kind of steer clear of that. What we are talking about, though, is formative assessment. So both of these terms we should be very familiar with. They've been around for around 50 years. So Michael Scriven coined the term summative assessment and formative assessment. Benjamin Bloom kind of furthered that in his work. And so formative assessment is really what we're talking about. It's not assessment of learning, but it's assessment as a part of the process of learning. And it really enables us through the use of AI to tailor an approach that is much more frequent and supports the process of learning through assessment. Now, students may not see formative assessment quite that way. They may still see formative assessment as something that's fairly high stakes, high pressure, very focused on the outcome, the mark, the grade, and the feedback. So we want to introduce another term to you that's not a new term, but it's a new way to think of and use the term. So it's something actually more micro, it's lower, it's more frequent and more transparent than either formative assessment or summative assessment. And it's called integrative assessment. And the way that we're using this term, especially when it comes to the use of AI in teaching and learning, is a little bit different. It's a much more holistic approach to evaluating whether or not learning is occurring that combines micro, sometimes invisible assessments that incorporate feedback and more authentic assessment throughout the process of learning. That the micro component of integrative assessment really speaks to the fact that without the use of some technology, and in this case, we're going to focus on AI, but without the use of some automation or technology, it would really be impossible for us to apply this type of assessment simply because we don't have the time. Teachers are already time poor. We're not able to create more hours in the day, but what we are able to do is to create a more efficient way of approaching this type of assessment. So I want you to have that in mind. Integrative assessment, this notion that we can, at every touch point, assess whether or not learning is occurring. So we're increasing the numbers of assessment, even if we may not call that an assessment. It's a chance to essentially create data points through the student engagement with some ed tech tool. And in the case of today, we're going to look at this with AI. The other component of this that I'd like you to consider is that within the context of AI, knowing that AI can easily complete a lot of assessments that we have in place today, and the use of AI detectors is not a winning solution, at least today as it stands, we need to think about what is our personal policy beyond what the district or the school applies in terms of the use of AI in assessment? How are we messaging to students what's acceptable and what's not? And I'd like to submit to you an idea that I came across recently. This comes from a framework that was published called the Artificial Intelligence Assessment Scale, or AIAS. It was developed by a group of researchers, and I really found it compelling. It's kind of a play on the traffic light analogy, but it expands that. And it takes us from level 0 to level 4. So level 0 is a lane, if you will, where no AI is permitted. This might be a situation where devices are off, the Wi-Fi network is off. We may even go back to pen and paper on something like this, but it's really no AI. It's much more of a traditional, rigorous, supervised assessment. But when we move up to level 1, now we start to permit AI as a study aid, both for preparation, but maybe not in producing assessed work. So it's a very light touch in terms of the use of AI. Level 2 is where we allow AI to be an assistant. So this is very specific, limited tasks like brainstorming, grammar checking, but we want to have a citation on when AI is used. Level 3, this is AI extended. Now this gets interesting, and these are the examples that I'm going to show you. So this is where we're using AI throughout the assessment process, but with human oversight. And on the student's part, we want to encourage critical evaluation. In fact, for older students especially, part of the assessment might be to evaluate the quality or the authenticity of content that AI has created. And finally, level 4 is where we're talking about AI empowered. Think of this as a full green light. We're wide open here. Students, educators, and the AI are collaborating experimentally, and they're achieving different outcomes, new outcomes in novel ways. So is this an exhaustive way to describe all of the possible approaches that we could take to using AI, both for assignments and projects, but more importantly for assessment? No, the devil's in the details, and you can double click on this. In fact, I'd encourage you to check out this work from Perkins, Furs, Rowe, and McVaugh that was from their book in 2024. But if we think about it just in terms of applicability and explainability to students, I really find this compelling because it's easy to understand, it's easy to explain, and if you're looking for a way to have just guardrails or guidelines that you give to students, I find it very useful. So let me give you an example of a level 3 or 4 assessment, and then I'll show you a live example of it. And then later I'll show you a recorded example of something like this. So imagine we're teaching nutrition, and we want to have students experience what it's like to engage as a dietitian. Uh, they may be much younger than what they would typically be if they were a dietitian, but we want them to experience that. This is a way where we can get closer to authentic assessments. And we want students to explore some common dietary advice that they're reading about and learning about in the class on nutrition, but we want them to really think through things that are evidence-based, practical, budget conscious, and we want to have them talk to an individual who's looking to change their lifestyle, change their diet. In fact, in this case, we're looking at an AI that's playing the role of a client coming in to talk to a dietitian. They're tired, they've got low energy, they want to eat better, but they're on a tight budget. So we want the student to ask clarifying questions, offer realistic, compassionate advice, and what the AI tutor is there to do, using a rubric that in the background is guiding the engagement and guiding the feedback and the grades that, if you choose to do that at all in this case, will be assigned. All of that is visible and in the control of you as the teacher within the LMS. And then at the end, in the class, either in groups or as a classroom activity, students can talk about how the AI generated advice either was plausible or not, and how the role play went, and how what the outcome of that was. So let me show you an example of this. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and switch over. So I actually built one of these, and I used this with a group of teachers. And you can see here, I came up with this idea of a NutriSensei is what I called it, my AI tutor in a nutrition class. And there's a role play that's a part of that, this role play that I described. And I'll show you what this looks like. Yeah, I'm ready to go. I won't do the whole thing. But when I'm ready to get started, I can go ahead and either with my keyboard, using the microphone, using an avatar, I could now engage in this role play. The way I set that up was really simple. I went in and inside of the Noodle Factory platform, I created an activity. It's a part of a nutrition course. It's a role play. And basically what I did is I very simply described what the role of the AI tutor was, what the learner role was, and everything else was AI created. I then edited that. I assigned a rubric, so the different skills that I was looking to assess, a description of that skill, points that would be assigned for each of the skills, published that, and I was done. I was ready to go. So that's something that when you think about all of the ways that you can approach different subjects, role plays are one of the most powerful things that you can do. And these days we see a lot of traction, a lot of uptake in various ways of teachers deploying role plays to have these sorts of conversational approaches to subjects because it gets closer to doing the learning rather than describing the learning. And I'll just show you what the end of a role play looks like. I actually did the role play yesterday as a part of a workshop, and I played a bad student. I wasn't a very good role play partner to my client, and you can see here's some of the overall feedback. Uh, the expectation was below the performance was below expectations. I asked some relevant questions, but I didn't really provide any actionable advice. My nutrition knowledge, these sorts of things that were a part of the rubric. Here were my scores, but I didn't do too well, and I was a difficult student. And so I wanted the audience in the workshop to see that not only are we looking at knowledge retention and the ability to talk about what we've learned, we're also assessing things like empathy. We're assessing communication style, engagement, responsiveness. So there's an element of natural language processing. There's an element of sentiment analysis and textual analysis that's going on that goes way beyond just whether or not a student has understood a topic. So I wanted to demonstrate that there's some flexibility in these types of role plays that we can leverage. Now, let me show you another example of this, and it has to do with the ability to engage with our voice and in a fairly complex topic, and it has to do with chemistry. So I'm just going to hit play on this so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. And I'm going to show you exactly how we set up this role play. This is a chemistry class sort of targeted at roughly 10th graders, somewhere in this age group. And the AI assistant is going to play the a lab demonstrator. The learner is there to come in and describe what they're doing related to certain chemical reactions. So you can see there the AI then created the scenario. I can then edit that if I'm not satisfied with the scenario. I can go ahead and assign my assessment criteria as I did with my nutrition role play, and I'm done. The other thing that I can do is I can customize the avatar. That could either be me if I want to uh, put myself in the role as the teacher. In this case, I'm going to create just an avatar, a 3D avatar. Go ahead and add that in, give some personality and a name to the avatar. Go ahead and save that, and I'm ready to go. So if we take a look at that, and we'll use the avatar rather than the keyboard in this case, how does this look for a student? And I'll kind of fast forward on this so you can see. So if we're having this conversation, so our student, Marilyn, is talking about, just jump back here and pause. So she's talking about her ability to understand this unknown solution. Now, the way that this can be used is kind of interesting. We've worked with different educators on role plays like this. This is something that can actually be used in the classroom. So think about being able to scale this type of interaction, this type of exercise in a lab environment in the classroom, being able to have an avatar to walk through a role play. That's one possibility. The other possibility is this is something that can be done at home, so outside of a lab environment, but being able to describe the knowledge that a student has related to these chemical reactions and have this role play partner. So when we think about that, what AI is able to do is it gives us this kind of wide range of opportunities that in all sorts of different subjects where it might be too costly, might be in terms of time or money, might be too complicated, or it might be a situation where students just are not getting enough practice. Role plays can be a very interesting example. And from an assessment perspective, what this allows us to do is in an integrative assessment to get much, much closer to authentic assessment, because through the role play, we're encouraging students to demonstrate their knowledge by doing rather than writing or describing. So I want to just check and see if we've got any questions in the Q&A at this point before we move on to a little exercise that I've got for you, something kind of fun, maybe a little scary, getting you to think about assessments in the context of your own class. And Eric, if you can maybe keep an eye on that for me as well, if we've got any questions in the Q&A, or Ashish, you can let me know, and I'll stop and we can address those.
Absolutely. I'll keep you posted.
Okay. So here's a little exercise for you. And this is something that I do really often with faculty members, and it has to do with a vulnerability assessment. If you are at all worried about whether or not your assessments can be taken and completed by an AI successfully, getting a good grade, let's try this together. So you can do this as a thought experiment, or if you have an assessment handy, or even later if you want to try this, this is something that you'll see in the materials when we send them out. So big question here, this is something that helpfully comes from the University of Michigan. Big question, does the assignment address a course competency or essential learning objective? Now, if the answer is no, there's an obvious choice point. You might want to consider dropping that, maybe offering that as an ungraded knowledge check, potentially, bringing that into an AI environment where it's more of an exercise rather than a graded assignment or an assessment. Or you might turn that into a class activity. But if the answer is yes, here is where you need to really think carefully. Can AI complete that assessment and pass? Well, again, if the answer is no, that's no worries. We just carry on, continue for the time being, but periodically come back and double check to see if AI can pass that assessment. If the answer is yes, though, now we've got some real important choices to make. If the answer is yes, and it would undermine the student's ability to learn and your ability to evaluate whether or not learning has occurred, then we have to either moderate that or mitigate that. So moderation might take on uh, the approach that we need to do maybe more in-class exams or in-class activities, things that you can actually see and monitor. The classic example of this might be a project or an approach to a project that you can see physically there in the classroom, an oral presentation or a project that needs to be presented, something that needs to be debated or argued in front of other human beings. That's a classic example of moderation. Now, if that sounds like it's time consuming, it is. So we run into the same old problem there that oral exams and things that happen in the classroom can take up time, and that can be a challenge. The other option is to mitigate, and this is the approach that we tend to advocate is if you can't use AI, but you need to flip the classroom in some way, that might be the way to try to mitigate this issue. Now, the other answer is no. If this situation, you would not see an undermining of student learning. It wouldn't undermine your ability to evaluate it. Well, then just integrate AI into the assessment. Just as you saw earlier, both in the nutrition example, in the role play, doing knowledge checks, assessing as the student is going along in their conversation with an AI, or doing something completely different and novel with AI at a level 3 or a level 4, as we talked about, go ahead and integrate that into the assessment process. So the bottom line here is if AI, in your case, is generating acceptable responses to assignments, projects, and most importantly, assessments, think about redesigning. So how do you redesign to require more authentic personal experience? Another example, and I've done this quite a bit, is incorporate current events or hyperlocal situations that are way beyond the scope of AI training data. One example that I did recently had to do with data that was hyperlocal. It was on campus. So go do interviews, go collect data from the campus, something that you could probably get AI to substitute or simulate, but there wouldn't be real data about a local campus. So go and get students to do that themselves. Demand process documentation and reflection. So many teachers, and you may have tried this yourself, getting students to show their work. One teacher I talked to yesterday had a really interesting idea related to this that's not new, but I really like the approach, and that was in a writing assignment, the output or the product of the writing assignment was not what was being assessed and graded, and the feedback was not on that. It was the prompt to get there. So talk about a great skill. And in this case, the student is not only learning to think critically about the writing process and the writing outcome, but there's an AI literacy component that's being taught as well, prompting. And that is what is being assessed. Because in this case, the teacher had set it up where you couldn't really give a good prompt to an AI without knowing something about the subject that was being written about. And so in this case, showing your work was a great substitute for traditional assessment. Adding oral components or real-time explanation is also a great approach. Now, this is a way that we can also use AI to give feedback on the oral engagement. So those role plays that we just saw, that's oral engagement. And so we can get feedback, assign a grade to that. We can also get students to record themselves doing the role play, even using tools that might have some sort of audio component and getting students to use that. That's a great way to substitute your evaluation, your feedback for the with the AI and allowing students to do that on their own time, at their own pace, and I should mention in their own preferred language. One of the things that we are really proud of at Noodle Factory is we support upwards of 110 languages. So even though the underlying content is in English, and this is really a factor of the large language model, so many tools would be able to do this, students can choose to use another language if they're more comfortable in that, unpack a subject in that language, and then let's assume they're in the classroom using English, when they come back in, they're much more comfortable and confident engaging with that subject in English because they've had the opportunity to use another language that they may happen to be more comfortable in. And then finally, think about how you can elevate to higher order thinking and analysis. So if today we're assessing the knowledge of a subject, how do we move towards more critical analysis, critical thinking, getting students to assess for themselves that aspect of what's happening with the subject? And then our assessment is about their ability to move higher up, to be more generalizable in their thinking, to think more in a more cross-curricular fashion, and to do the analysis. So if all of these things sound new and maybe a little bit frightening, you're not alone. They're really coming to the surface thanks to AI. But as a teacher, really AI is there to help you as well. So you're not alone in this. And if you think about something like, how do I take my existing assessment if we need to mitigate or if we need to moderate? General purpose AI tools like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Perplexity, and others can help you to do that if we just ask the right question, if we give the right prompt. Recently, I worked with a physical education teacher who was teaching coaching. These were older high school students. So teaching coaching, what does that mean? And typically the assessment that the coach had been using, the PE teacher had been using, was to get students to describe how coaching occurs. Well, if you think about that, that's a writing exercise, something that AI can easily do and easily pass. And so his question to me was, how do I turn what is a writing exercise today, a written assessment today, into something that is more AI resistant? And I said, there's your prompt right there. Don't ask me. Go ask a general purpose AI tool. So he turned around and he asked Claude that question, and Claude came back with at least a half dozen good recommendations. And one of them was get students to actually stand up and use a physical poster. So it was a poster exercise now in front of the class to describe in their own words and defend their approach towards coaching. So it became more of a classroom activity, became more of an oral exercise. So the feedback not only came from the teacher, it came from the peers in the class, and the grade was assigned in that way. So really a different way of approaching that was very AI resistant and didn't involve AI at all. All right, so as we start to get into wrap-up mode, I've just got some ideas for you. Um, so think about what you can do in the very short term, the medium term, and the long term. So one of the things that I would recommend is go and stress test one assignment with AI. Actually take that assessment or that assignment and get AI to try to do that, to complete it, to come up with the product that you expect. And then you grade that assessment. How well did AI do in completing that assignment project and the related assessment? Uh, Take those results and then drive some sort of evaluation and potentially redesign or mitigation of the output of that stress test. In the medium term, think about one assignment that you want to give a very clear AI policy around. So if you think about those lanes that we talked about, level 0 through level 4, what is one assignment or project or assessment that you can give a very clear AI policy around? Are there assignments, assessments, projects that you can make level 1, level 2? Are there others that might want to consider that could be a level 3 or a level 4? Does that require any redesign? Is there any sort of rework or rethinking that you need to do? And think about how you communicate that to your students. Again, in the medium term, find a community of practice. So we actually have a community of practice that we sponsor in Noodle Factory, but find one maybe in your school, in your district. Find birds of a feather who are on this same journey, who are looking to ethically and responsibly apply AI in their teaching and learning practice. There are plenty of them. And then in the longer term, maybe this semester, thinking towards next semester, redesign your most vulnerable assessment. Maybe do a bit more work and looking at other assessments, find the one that's most vulnerable and redesign that. Now, it's at this point you might think, well, should that be level 4? Should that be wide open AI? Probably not. You might think that I'm an AI evangelist because of what I do. This is my full-time job, and I have a platform that does this, but I recognize the need for balance. So level 0, level 1 has a big role to play in assessment, the quality of assessment, and our ability to move towards summative assessment. But in that redesign, you might find opportunities for a level 3, level 4 type of an assessment where, yeah, we do want to have AI pretty extensively used. We do want students to be AI empowered and experiment and meet learning outcomes in novel ways. So don't limit yourself to level 0, but at the same time, don't go headlong towards level 4. All right. So as we come to a close, let me flash up this QR code again where you can get access to the Noodle Factory platform. You can try some of the things that we looked at today, not only the role plays, but quizzes, allowing students to explore and engage in the curriculum in that walled garden, in that protected space where you have full visibility and control. There are also a couple of AI related action research papers that we'd like to share with you. So some work that we've done with institutions where those level 3, level 4 type lanes have been applied with students with some pretty interesting outcomes in multilingual classrooms, with students with special needs, particularly in the area of dyslexia and autism, where as a happy accident, as a part of the action research, we've really seen some interesting gains for students who not only need to get comfortable through the use of another language, but also just need the time. And I'm thinking here specifically of students with dyslexia, mild autism, who just need that time and focus and attention on their own with a subject. AI in a non-judgmental way really gives them that opportunity to do so. So please do sign up for that. And there's also a way for you to quickly get in touch with NTS and schedule some time along with Noodle Factory if you'd like a deeper walkthrough of some of the things that we showed you today. There is my contact information. And I should mention too, before I turn it back over to Eric, that one of the things that you're going to get today is a paper that I've recently written on designing for academic integrity in this age of AI. So specifically, the way that we do things at Noodle Factory, and a lot of the things that we talked about today, but how you design assignments, projects, and assessments with everything that we had in mind today and more, so that academic integrity really is something that you build in to the engagement with students, even where you're allowing students to use AI. It becomes a byproduct of the design that you begin to implement going forward in your assignments, projects, and assessments. And Eric, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Jim, thank you. Fascinating, incredible. I wish I had this when I was in school.
Me too.
Really, yeah, it would have helped out a lot. Anyway, so Ashish, if you could open this up for Q&A and we'll take questions in real time. I didn't see, we do have some Q&A in the chat. I'll go ahead and start with those. Oh, that's just Ashish posting questions. So any questions you have, please post it in the chat, or Ashish, I don't know if you're going to open, you can raise your hand. We can open your mic as well. Either way.
One question I often get, Eric, related to this is if I'm going to use AI, and we're speaking broadly here, so yes, Noodle Factory, but other AI tools, um, how do I maintain that visibility? So you heard me mention that before a couple of times. How do I maintain that visibility? Because if students are using ChatGPT, and they are, by the way, there's no such thing as AI proof. That's another important point. But how do I maintain that visibility? So you want to work with tools that you can place inside of your learning management system. You want to be able to capture everything that's going on, particularly feedback. And if you're going to be using these tools to assign grades, you don't want to have to do that manually. You want it to be a part of your learning management system. So that's a really key consideration, especially if you're going to deploy this with students for formative assessment.
Yeah, I
And that
agree.
is
Just
something
add,
that we do, by the way.
yeah, I will add on to that. Now, my daughter would kill me, and if her high school is being represented on this call, I'm not going to say her name, but we talked about it. I wanted to get her thoughts, and Absolutely. She takes her content, her PDFs from school, she uploads it into ChatGPT. She's able to engage with it and ask questions. The problem is there's no validated and verified sources. Um, it'll check the internet because it's not contained within your environment and the structured content. Um, so it's just there's no way to control that. It's not tied into your lesson plan. It's not tied into the assessments and the quizzes. If your students aren't given the opportunity to have something that's more controlled, they're going to find it elsewhere, and it's not going to be in the right environment. So it's very relevant in my opinion. I see this as cloud. When cloud came out, um, we it was slow to adopt, right? However, the value of cloud was incredible. The scale, the quick to I can easily turn up cloud resources, compute resources, storage on the fly, and that was really important for researchers. It was important for developers, and so they just started whipping out their own credit card, going to AWS and spinning up cloud. Then all of a sudden we had this cloud sprawl, right? And we spent years, an IT team spent years reeling that back in so they can get control of that. Um, I see this as similar. If we don't step up and do something today and offer a solution that's controlled, we're going to see, we're going to have to probably deal with this again. Is there going to be a lot of AI sprawl?
Yeah. Now, the important thing to remember too is it's not realistic to think that students will only work with tools that you give them inside of the LMS. So that's another reason to be really open and bring AI out of the shadows. If it is in the shadows in your classroom, kind of disclose what's going on. And we can lead by example in this way. Disclose how you're using AI. Uh, Disclose how you want students to use AI and make sure that they understand where the guardrails are so that when they're using tools inside of the LMS, well, yeah, we've got that visibility and control, but knowing that they're using other tools outside of the LMS, outside of our purview, you've given them that guideline. You've given them the parameters of what good looks like from an academic integrity standpoint.
Agree. Okay. Well, if any questions that come up, ask them now. Otherwise, you can always email myself or Jim directly. Be on the lookout for the content to come to you, so you can see the recording. Will be several published content that Jim referenced. And thank you all for joining. So, anything last comments, Jim?
Yeah, I think just make sure that if you're interested in this very low risk opportunity to try this out with Noodle Factory. I'm sure we have a range of viewpoints on what AI is in teaching and learning, and either the promise or the risk. And so, I'd encourage you to take this low risk opportunity to try some things out. We'd love to help you get running, even if it's just in pilot mode before you expose this to students at all, so you can get comfortable with the idea of how you blend this into your teaching practice. So take advantage of that opportunity. We're definitely here to help you with that.
We do have a question from Elizabeth. Oh, she raised her hand. Ashish, can you please open up the microphone for Elizabeth? Or let's see if I can do that.
Yeah, she has access to the microphone. She
Okay,
can
great.
unmute herself.
Yes, Elizabeth.
Please
You wanna-
unmute yourself, Elizabeth.
She's on mute. Can you unmute her for me?
Oh,
there
right.
we go.
Yes. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm Elizabeth. I'm from Brunel Medical School, Brunel University, the licensed institution. And I was really interested in what you said about role playing. And because I teach in the medical school, I would love for my students to have, or ChatGPT or any LLM for that matter, a role play, a patient, and then take them through history taking and all that. But my problem is I am no computer IT expert, being a sort of biologist, physiologist, so to speak. So I would really love help with, if you can, that is, or make some suggestions, how I could possibly use some LLM, but within the LMS, which is our virtual
Right.
learning environment, so that I can monitor what my students are saying to the bot and various other things. So this kind of role play that you did with the dietitian is something very similar. We have something called psychology, sociology, and lifestyle changes. I particularly teach cardiovascular neurology, so but still, having scenarios and getting the bot to give the students answers and for students to be interacting with it and learning. I want to see their learning. That is not
Yes.
visible when they're using the publicly available chat GPTs and Claude. So I don't really know what they're doing. I mean, yes, I tell them you can do this, but there's no way of me understanding what they're doing and
Right.
checking their learning and helping them. So
Right.
if you have any
We'd
ideas.
love to talk with you. Yeah, we do a lot of work with medical campuses. It's so funny that you're from Brunel, so we work a lot in the University of London Federation,
Yeah.
and have a number of implementations with UOL Federation universities.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a simple example of one narrow application that probably aligns with what you're thinking. We work with a medical campus where preclinical students just don't get enough time to practice
Yeah.
before they go and talk to actual patients,
Yeah.
because obviously that's expensive. You're hiring actors, and it's very
Yeah.
rare
Yeah.
but valuable. And
Yeah.
so we're not replacing that, but what we're doing in this use case is the students are using that role play functionality that you saw around particular scenarios. In fact, they're the same scenarios that are given to actors, but they're able to do that with an avatar on their own terms, at their own time, at their own pace, as many times as they would like.
Yeah.
And it really helps the student to develop that confidence in a preclinical environment. However, you also have the visibility to that. So it's something where you see
Yeah.
the feedback. It's not only on diagnostic capability, but on empathy and patient engagement, things like that. And you can assign marks to that as well.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to see. They do use, I mean, Dartmouth school, I think Geisel School, I can't remember the exact name, but they're an Ivy League institution. And so the neuroscientist there, who he has designed with his computer colleague, and I think he does have a degree in computer science as well. So they designed a lot of cases around neurology, and he's published many papers. Now, he's happy for us to use that publicly available platform, but what my students are doing is not going to be visible to me. It'll be visible to him. It's not going to help me in any shape or form, and I cannot have that conversation with my students about how they can improve and bring in my other colleagues from my own institution. So yeah, I would really love
Right.
help. Shall we then take this outside because there may be
Yeah.
other questions? Yeah, fantastic. I
And
will email you.
we can talk about that. And we work inside of Brightspace, which I believe is probably your
Oh,
LMS.
oh, getting even better. Thank you. This is amazing. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. No, thank you for that question.
You're welcome.
All right, any other questions? Just raise your hand if you do. All right, well, we are 1 minute over, so thank you. If you have questions, please respond. But again, thanks everybody, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you all.